Thank you, Ronnie. That's about as good an introduction as I've ever had. What a day. Hasn't it been a great day? I know some of you have really enjoyed it. I know you're probably tired. We have the unenviable task of speaking to people who have had a good meal and heard a lecture last hour that I'm sure was extremely boring, and you're already asleep now. No, but I know it'll be difficult this last session to stay totally alert and awake, and hopefully some of these things will be useful to you. I've enjoyed the day. I know the numbers are not what the people here at Adamsville had hoped for, but please do not be discouraged in that. There has been a lot of good that has begun today. And if only one or two people catch a little bit of a fire to tell other people about Christ, it will have been worth it eternally for those people who are led to the Lord through those one or two people. It's not a bunch of people. Roebuck, Ronnie's already mentioned Dad, and I'll try not to say too much about him, but it's hard for me not to. Roebuck, for years and years, averaged baptizing one person a week, one person every 7 days. And I know Dad was constantly frustrated that he could not get more people to do personal work. And that church baptized more folks than about anybody I know. But it wasn't because they had this mass group of people. It was because they had a handful of people who got serious about it. The most people I've ever baptized personally in 1 year, taught and baptized, is 38, I believe. I baptized 38 people 1 year that I taught. And I baptized mothers I didn't have a hand in teaching. That was my best year personally in that. That year, the church baptized 46 people. And folks all around were saying, how are y'all baptizing so many people? How are y'all baptizing so many people? Well, it wasn't y'all. It was obviously through the Lord's work. But it doesn't take a lot of people doing this. It just takes some people that are serious about it and decide they want people to go to heaven and decide to get busy in helping them learn the gospel and love them enough, patiently. What's the song say? Patiently win them. And that's what we're working for. It's been a good day. I've heard one story after another about my dad, and I always enjoy hearing those stories. So thank each of you for things that you've shared about him. And I'm not trying to be my dad. I'm trying to be the best I can be for the Lord. But if I can be like him in some ways, that's how a compliment is there to get paid. When someone says what you did or what you said or whatever, that's just how compliments I get in life. So you've been kind about that. We're going to talk this session about the low-hanging fruit, about how to reach out to folks, how to reach out to people. And hopefully this will be a useful session for you. It'll be a little bit different than the other sessions, I can assure you. I want to begin by finding out how many congregations we have represented in here today. There's probably going to be 5 to 10 different congregations, but I know Adamsville is here. What other congregations are represented? Meridianville, thank you. Hillview. Asheville Road. Berea. Plainview, okay. Sullivan Springs. Okay. All right, so that's 7 or 8, I think, that are in here right now. And I know there have been a lot of other congregations represented in other classes and all, and we appreciate everybody that's been a part of this. What we're going to spend time in here talking about today is a congregational thing. This is something you have to work together as a congregation. I'm going to do something that is always extremely dangerous for me, and that is I'm going to speak without notes. I like to speak from manuscript. I like to give people a copy of what I'm going to say, but every once in a while I try to go without notes. So in doing that, if I say something today and I finish and you think, that wasn't right, it probably wasn't, come and correct me and I'll do what I can to correct it, okay? And if I leave something out I need to say, I'll apologize to you now. But as one writer said, they never know what you don't say, so you won't know if I left anything else. That works out well for all of us. So, how do we reach out to people? Well, the low-hanging fruit, the bottom shelf, in my opinion, are those people who come to our services. The Gospels talk about us being sowers, and the sower went out to sow the seed, right? And we have sometimes in our churches developed a mentality that we build a nice building, we hire a local preacher, we do what we can, and we expect the crops to come to us. The Scriptures never give us that indication. In fact, in the book of 1 Corinthians, I believe it's chapter 14, there's an interesting wording in the original language that says, and what if an outsider, and that's not the right word there, should come into your assembly. They're talking about people speaking in tongues and the disorder that would have been going on, that was going on in the church at Corinth, and how they would think you were mad. But what I find crazy, what I find interesting in that text is the concept of what if an outsider should come in. As if in the first century, an outsider, you would be surprised if an outsider came in. In fact, I imagine that would be the case. If a guest came in an assembly in the first century, what would be their first impression? What would be their first thought? It would probably be, is this person here with the Roman government, and are we going to get in trouble for what we're doing? They were not visitor friendly in the first century. They were shocked if someone came in. So this whole concept is a little bit different of us building a building and people coming in. We're to go out and sow the seed. The greatest impact we make on people is not the impact we make on them here in this building. It's when you go out and your child's playing t-ball with the Sands family, Ronnie, or when your child's playing Little League football and there's some families on there. That's where you will have an impact. But we are happily living in a time where in our congregations, every one of them, occasionally a guest will come. It may be more for you or it may be less for you. We, for a long time, averaged 4 to 6 first-time families every week in the congregation where I'm blessed to be, the Spring Meadows congregation in Spring Hill, Tennessee. 4 to 6 new families every week would be our guest. It's an area that's really growing. Most of the people there have not lived there a long time, so they move into town, and they're just looking for a church. Many of them don't give a rip about the denomination and the doctrine and the teaching or the name on the sign. They're just looking for somewhere to worship. And so we end up getting a lot of people that anywhere I've ever been in my life before, we didn't have those opportunities. Okay? So we're having some really good opportunities. But you will have some people who will visit you, some guests that will come. And how you affect those people, in all likelihood, will have an effect on them eternally. So how do you have the most effect? How do you pick the low-hanging fruit? How do you make an impression on those first-time guests? One guy says, and I wrote it down and have never forgotten it, guests are gifts. Guests are gifts. It's like, we go out and we're constantly looking for those treasures, Matthew 13, hidden in the field. And then we give all we have so that we can buy that treasure. We're looking for pearls. We're that salesman, that seeker, that merchant looking for goodly pearls that we can harvest for the kingdom. That's what we're doing, but every once in a while we get that gift. It walks through the door and into our building. How do we make an impression on it? So that's what I want to spend time with in the 30 minutes or so that I have with you right now. I'm going to walk you through a series of things. And as I said, I'll probably leave some out. I'll probably have to go back and pick some up as we go, but hopefully it'll all make sense to you. How do you make that great impression? How do you turn a first-time guest into a full-time member? Isn't that really kind of the goal? You want to go from being someone who does not know the Lord to someone who is a highly motivated, active Christian, someone in your congregation who loves the Lord, who's fully committed to Him. That's what you want to do. You want to take them from someone who just happened in your building because they were looking for a church to someone who now is going to be with you in heaven for eternity. That's your goal. So how do you take them from there to there? I believe the impression we make on them makes all the difference in the world. Studies say that what you do in the first 5 minutes of the time from the time a person pulls onto, excuse the expression, your property makes all the difference in the world if they'll ever come back or not. So how do you make an impression in 5 minutes? We've all heard that phrase, you know, first impressions are lasting impressions, right? We've heard that. And they are, aren't they? I mean, what you think of somebody in the first couple of minutes you meet them really will affect it for a long, long time. Whether it should or should not, we're not going to debate. It does. So the impression, how do you make an impression not as a person, but as a church on someone? Okay? So let's walk through that. Number one, the first thing, is what do you say to them before they get inside the building? Okay? I'll call it zone one, for lack of a better way to say it. Zone one. I loved basketball when I was in high school. I went to Jefferson Christian Academy. Ben Vick was my high school basketball coach and was a dear, dear friend. And he loved to play zone defense. We played the 1-3-1 zone. Well, zone one is what happens before they get in your building. So how do you make an impression on them in zone one? So let's talk about that. First of all, when they pull onto the property, it needs to be well groomed. Okay? I mean, the grass should be cut. Somebody says, oh, you're talking about paying somebody to cut the grass? No, I'm saying you cut the grass. I mean, if nobody's cutting the grass, you cut it. Somebody's got to do that. The bushes should be trimmed. The paint should be good. I mean, if your building's all crumbled and everything, you know, do something about it. Get the thing painted, okay? Somebody says, wait a minute, I can't afford to do that. Well, if your house is nicely painted, excuse the expression, the Lord's house is not nicely painted, your priorities probably aren't in place, okay? I mean, David was right, you know, how can he dwell in a palace and the Lord dwells in a tent? And how, you know, and I know the Lord doesn't dwell here. I'm not saying that, but I am saying take care of what you've got. I preached in Augusta, Georgia all this week. We went door knocking all over Augusta, Georgia. We saw in Augusta, Georgia, that's where the Masters tournament is. We saw houses that I probably could not pay the owner enough money for them to let me go in their house. I mean, it was that they were multi-million-dollar homes. Monday afternoon, we were out knocking doors and doing some videos of some of the kids knocking doors. And when we came into this neighborhood, and it was a low-cost neighborhood. The houses there were probably $50,000 probably a house in the neighborhood was $50,000. But we noticed something on 2 or 3 streets in that neighborhood. Every yard was cut. Every house, there were some toys in front of a couple houses that were clean. Houses were clean. They were beautiful. It wasn't government housing. It was government. The people just took, sold expression, pride in what they had. Well, there's a degree to which we ought to take pride in what we have that belongs to the Lord, right? And so what your building says when they walk up. I'm not saying build a multi-million-dollar building, but I do not drive up in front of a church building without noticing. And if I don't, when I preach it, I preached 400 times last year. When I preach over and over and over again, and I notice those things, you know somebody who's never been here before notices them. So they notice, you know, do they have, you walk in the foyer, is it all junked up? And, you know, we got camp stuff from 6 years ago and last leader's notebooks at 4 years old and a guest book that if you look at it, the last time a guest signed it was 6 years ago. I mean, you know, if everything is old and out of date and not taken care of and junked up and not clean looking, guests are going to notice. You ever had company, important company coming to your house? I hated it when I was growing up and we had company coming because I knew what that meant. We were going to spend 2 or 3 days before they got there. We used to wash the baseboards in our house. I don't know if you may still do that. I hadn't done that in years. And thankfully I don't have to do that anymore. But I used to think, they're not going to get down and look at our baseboards. But Mom wanted the house to look good because we had company coming. You've got company coming. What does your building say about that? You need to have a place you need a place for guest parking. Now, I notice y'all have visitor parking here at Adamsville. I don't know about any of the rest of you, but we use the term guest over visitors, and I'm not fully sure why, but the studies I've read say that the term guest is a friendlier term. They say visitors are expected to visit and leave. Guests are welcomed any time. know what that means, but that's what I've heard, okay? So we use the term guest. I was impressed when I pulled up and saw the visitor parking out there, a place that's set aside for those people. Most church buildings have a main entrance. Y'all have a main one here. You'll occasionally have a guest come in somewhere else, but most of your guests try to filter into one place. And we have a number of things that we do for our guests when they pull onto our property. One, we have a sign pointing them to where guest parking is. It's a movable sign. That way it's not out all week, but it just says guest parking this direction. That filters them and that way when somebody pulls into that place, we know immediately that that person is a guest. That kind of helps you, especially if you're a larger church and whoever's greeting that day may not know everybody. They know this is a guest, okay? So guest parking. We have those signs. Those signs are clean. They're well marked. They're updated. We try to keep them looking good. We have a logo that we use at Spring Meadows. That's right there on my shirt. It's on everything I think that I own now, but it is something that it helps people identify us. They see that enough and they begin to identify with it. So we have that even painted on the guest sign. So guest parking. We have some children, high school and under. They can't be college students, high school and under, that actually will go to their car, and when they get out of their car, we'll welcome them. And we have that every Sunday. If you come to our place, it would be rare, but if that happened, but if that did not happen, we have young people that will welcome them. Now, we use young people for that for a specific reason. We want our guests to feel good. I had somebody ask me one time, is this one of those churches where everybody tries to feel good? Now, think what that's saying. I mean, there's only two ways to answer that question, right? Yes or no. Does anyone want to answer that question? No? I mean, yes, we want lost people to feel good here. Now, we want to feel good here because we want to teach them the gospel. We want to feel good here because we want them to learn the gospel. We want them to feel good here because they learn the gospel and obey the gospel. But no, we don't want them to feel bad. We want them to come back. We want them to come back more than once. We want to come back enough that every time they come, they hear the gospel and they're inundated with the gospel. And unless they come back, if we make them feel bad when they come in, they're not going to come back. So we found young people work better than old people. Sorry, nothing against us old people. I'm going to turn 50 in a couple of weeks, so I can say that now. I'm ARP there, 50 now, right? So when you get older, you can. But they want to see young people, so we use our young people for that. Next thing is, still in Zone 1, outside our building, we always have 2 people at the doors outside the building. Now, I know we always have 2 people. It doesn't matter if it's 10 below zero or if it's 90 degrees with 100% humidity, which it's going to be tomorrow. We will have 2 people outside the building. I know because I'm one of those 2 people. And I've got a million things going on every Sunday. But the one thing I do, not the one thing, I do a lot of things, but one of my primary things I do is I'm in front of that building, and every guest that comes to that building, members as well, I greet them. I want them to know and to be greeted well and somebody be friendly to them. And I tell them my name. If they don't tell me their name, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to badger them, but I welcome them. Let them know I'm glad they're here. And then I open the door and let them in. Inside, we have Zone 2. That's our foyer. Y'all have a foyer here. Most churches have them. Some have little bitty ones. Some have big ones. I don't care what size your foyer is. But we have 3 couples inside our foyer. 3 couples inside our foyer. Now, that may be a mom and a child. It may be a husband and wife. But we'll have 3 couples inside the foyer. And inside the foyer, that couple's job is to welcome everybody that comes in, to hand them a church bulletin and a worship handout. Our worship handout has 2 sides. One side has an order of worship. The other side has a copy of my outline for the day, fill in the blank outline on it. And they hand them an order of worship and a church bulletin. And they say, we're glad you're here. They welcome them, and they get their name. Now, there's a couple other things they do in Zone 2. They ask them, do you live around here, or are you from out of town? That's an extremely important question. Because if they live there, it's somebody we're going to try to reach. If they're from out of town, we're still glad they're there, but we're not going to have the opportunity we would have otherwise. We know this may be a one-shot deal. But if they live there, they become extremely important to us. They then take them inside to the main auditorium. They walk with them inside the main auditorium, and they introduce them to another couple. We have 4 or 5 couples that just stand in the back, it's to the side in our building, but where you come in, we have 4 or 5 couples standing there, and they'll walk them over and say, Miss Hayes, this is the McCormicks. The McCormicks just moved to town last week and came to visit us today. And the McCormicks then say, Miss Hayes, do y'all know anybody around here? Oh yeah, we know the Harrelsons. Well, if they know the Harrelsons, the McCormicks will say, well, they normally sit right back over in this area, and they're right over there now. I'm sure they want to see you. Or they say, well, they're not here yet, but why don't you hang out here with them? We'll visit a little while. When they come in, I'll make sure you get with them. Now, you can do that any way you want. That's what we do. If they say, no, I don't know anyone here, man, what an opportunity. I mean, this is a wide open door now. And so they say, why don't you come and sit with us? Guests don't want to be badgered, but they also don't want to be lonely, and they feel accepted. Now, one of the things we challenge our people with is we say we do not want any guests to get out of our building without at least 25 people greeting them. Now, that may be a huge challenge for some of you, but depending on the size of your congregation. But I think you should challenge your people with a goal. Now, don't say that goal publicly, because if you say it publicly and then only 2 people speak to them, you're probably going to be pretty embarrassed. But people need to know. Your members need to know. We're challenging. We don't want people to get outside without people speaking to them. We want them to feel welcome. So, the Hayeses sit with the McCormicks, and the McCormicks have a job to do. One is, we use clip pads for attendance. Do y'all use anything here? Some churches use visitor cards. Some people use y'all use clip pads? Okay. We found clip pads work. They're the best of the worst. Okay, there's no such thing as a good way. The only good way to get visitors' names, guests' names, is by looking them in the face and getting their name. And as soon as you stop making eye contact with them, take your pen and your piece of paper and write their name down. That's the only real way to get their names. Because about 60% of your guests will not fill out anything you put in front of them. Okay? Now, the best method we found, again, the best worst method we found is clip pads. So one of the jobs of McCormick's is, when they're sitting beside the Hayes, is to see if the Hayes fill out the clip pad. If the Hayes don't fill out the clip pad, they've got the responsibility of giving me or somebody in the congregation that's going to follow up that giving them the Hayes' name. That's their responsibility. But if they fill out the clip pad, they can leave that responsibility behind. The next thing that the McCormicks have as a duty, as a responsibility, is to invite the Hayes to lunch. And they say it this way: hey, I know you're probably going to eat lunch today. We'd love to take you to lunch with us today. Okay? We'd love to take you to lunch with us today. Now, I'm going to pull back the curtain on a couple of things here. And I think at least one of you was in my last class, or maybe, was anybody, were you in my last class? No, nobody was. Okay. So I'm going to let you in on a couple of things right now. And you can do with this whatever you want to, okay? You can take it and you can write something bad about me and put it in a brotherhood paper if you want to. I'm perfectly fine with that. I won't be mad. Well, I'll be mad at you, but we'll get over it, okay? You can call me up and tell me I'm a horrible person if you want to. That's perfectly fine, because some days I am a horrible person and I need to hear that periodically too. So you can do anything you want to with this, but I'm going to let you in on a couple of things that we do. You may not like it, but we do these things. If the McCormicks take the Hayes to lunch and buy their lunch, the McCormicks can bring the receipt to me or to one of the elders, and we will pay for that lunch. Well, oh, you shouldn't do that. Okay, that's fine. If you don't think you should do it, don't do it, okay? We do that. Now, I will tell you, we've been doing this for between 5 and 6 years, and so far we've never bought anybody's lunch. We haven't. So until it happens, I guess it's not a theological discussion, right? We can just talk about it. So far, it's never happened. But we've made that offer to people. If you buy somebody's lunch that visits us, and you're trying to make them feel welcome, and you turn in the receipt, we will pay for their lunch. We'll pay for your lunch too, but we'll pay for their lunch. And again, we just think that's a good investment. Now, you may think it's a bad one. I'm going to talk about some other things that we do that you may not like as well. They're not crazy things, I don't think, but let me give you a little insight here that may or may not be useful to you. Every person who becomes a regular attender at your congregation, every person who becomes a regular attender at your congregation is worth $20 a week to that work. financially. Now, you do the math. You take the number of people in your congregation, multiply it by 20, and you're going to get your weekly contribution, or within 20% of it, one way or the other. I found that true across the board in our brotherhood. And that I'm talking about if it's a 2-year-old child or a 80-year-old person, every person. You take your attendance, multiply it by 20, you'll get your weekly contribution, or within 20 to 25% of it. Okay, that's just the way it is. Wish it was 40, but it's 20. That's the number. Somebody says, well, it's going to cost you to take them to lunch. Well, if we take them to O'Charlie's and it costs you $40, and they eventually become a part of your congregation, husband, wife, and 2 kids, they're worth $80 a week to your congregation. Now every once in a while I hear elders say the church should be run like a business. Okay, that's running like a business, all right? I don't like that phrase. I don't think the church should be run like a business. The church isn't a business. It's a living organism. But that is, from the business standpoint of it, it's worth it to invest in your guest. You say, oh, how much money do you spend on your guest? Well, you spend something on them. You have a gospel meeting, you bring in a speaker, and you pay that speaker. I love gospel meetings. I do a lot of gospel meetings, as many as my elders let me do. I love preaching in gospel meetings. But the fact is, it may be a better investment of that gospel meeting money to spend it on ways to make guests feel welcome and to reach out to people than I don't think it's one or other thing, but it may be in some places a better investment. Now somebody says, well, no, you shouldn't think of it that way. Well, now, do you get the worst preacher for a gospel meeting you can get, or who you think the best one you can get is? You try to get the best one you can get, right? Well, do the best you can in other things too. So, to take them to lunch, right? Monday, we do not have a church secretary at the congregation that I'll work with. We decided not to spend our money, the Lord's money, on that. We're not opposed to them. Don't believe it's a sin to have them. I think they're useful. I've worked with them in the past. Some are really great people. We just don't have the money to do that with. We're an odd church. Again, 400 to 500 folks, and we don't have a secretary. That's a little odd to me, okay? But we don't have one. But we do have a lady that's volunteered to take all the guest names we get every week and to help me in searching for those guests. We use all sorts of tools. We use a phone book. We use yellowpages.com. Whitepages.org.com. We use anywho.com. We use, if we can use any of the local utility companies, we use them. The oddest place we use is local pizza restaurants. Domino's, Little Caesars. If they've ordered pizza, they have their name and address. And if you can figure out how to talk nice enough to that person standing behind the counter, they will give you an address if you give them a name. And no, they're not supposed to, okay? It's against company policy, I can guarantee you. But if you're nice enough to them, they will give you that address. And that's just my experience. If we can't find any other way, we'll stop at the pizza place. Like, man, we're looking for the Smiths, and we can't figure out where they live. Can you help us? They said, well, let's look. And they, oh, yeah, they're, I did have somebody say to me one time, what if somebody doesn't want to be found? Well, they can tell me they don't want to be found. They've got a mailbox, so apparently they want somebody to find them, okay? So we find them. In 25 years of doing this, I've never had anybody, I've only had one person in 25 years who got upset because I came to visit them. That takes me to the next step. Before we leave the church building, before we get to Monday, I told you to back up some. I'm going to back up and tell you one more thing about Sunday. Let's talk about our Sunday services for just a couple of moments. I am not one who believes that we should put our best people in front of the church week after week. Now, somebody says, what are you talking about by saying something like that? Well, worship is not a performance for each other. Okay? Now, I do believe we should have the best preacher we can have. I do believe your song leader should be able to lead singing. It goes with the title. Even though it's not a biblical title, we have them. You should use the person that does that the best. But you don't need to have trials for prayers and things like that, for people to read scriptures. I just don't think that's wise. I mean, if Bubba gets up there and he can't pronounce half the words in a verse, that's perfectly fine. You probably got some Bubbas that are guests that can't pronounce half the words themselves. And they might be happy to be at a church where there are some real people who have a problem pronouncing Mephibosheth. I mean, there are probably some people out there that can't pronounce that name. I probably mispronounced it then, so see. Now, But I do think you need to think through how you do things. And I would recommend that you begin your service with a time of welcome in which you welcome the people that are there. Because you never know who's in that audience week after week. And just don't spend 75 minutes. We really mess up with announcements sometimes. The CIE group will meet this morning, and tonight before service, the L2L group will be meeting. And some of us will be going up to PTP, and a few of us are going to be involved in, and people are saying, the KFC group, and people are saying, what in the world are they talking about? We're using a foreign language to them. And you're making announcements that don't necessarily need to be made. If you want to have a time for announcements, have a time for announcement. But do that some other time. Make your opening stuff welcome. Welcome. We're glad you're here. If there's something huge, if there's been a baptism the last week, announce the baptism. If there's a new birth, announce the new birth. If now, sick people, somebody says, what do you do about sick folks? Well, here's what we do. You know why you announce sick people at church? Why do you announce sick people at church? So people can pray for them, right? So what we do is we give the names of our sick people, or somebody's died, we give them to, it's a unique concept. It's really far out there, okay? So don't get too excited. But we give those names of the person leading the prayer. And we actually say, would you pray for this person? Rather than spending 30 minutes and before that service gets started, everybody's already depressed because everybody's sick and dying, okay? We just let the person pray and lead the prayer for them. Okay, so we get to Monday. We collect all the names. Monday night at 6:30, we have what we call no guilt visitation. I named it that. If you don't like the name, you can talk to me about it. But I named it that for a reason. Every visitation program I've ever been to and every church I've ever been a part of has people who come to the visitation program because they think they've got to come to the visitation program and they feel guilty if they don't. And oftentimes those people are the worst folks in the world to go out and visit people. And so we call it no guilt visitation. And we're very clear. If you don't want to visit people, don't come to this. We don't want you here just because you feel like there's something going on at the church building, you got to be there. We want you to come if you want to visit people. If you want to help us make people feel welcome. If you want to help teach people the gospel. If that is what your skill is, we want you to come. In a church of 400 to 500 people, the most people ever had on Monday night at 6:30 is 10. Our normal number is 6. That's 3 couples. So, oh man, you ought to be able to get more out than that. Well, maybe we should, but we don't. That's what we get and that's what we use. And I'd rather have 3 couples committed that are going to do a good job than 70 people that are just because they feel like they have to be there. Because if they're just doing it because they feel like they have to be there, it'll show in the way they visit. So Monday night we meet at 6:30. We divide the names of people who are our guests the day before, and we have them. We visit them. Now, let me tell you what all we do in that time. And there's a reason we do all this. First of all, before we get there, somebody in the congregation who doesn't like to visit but has other skills and talents will bake some homemade banana bread. It's from a recipe that we share. We ask them not to use their own recipe because we don't want them to use their own recipe. We want to use a recipe that the bread tastes good. And so we use a recipe that's a common recipe that's proven and tried and tested. It works, so we use that recipe. We share it with them. If you'll make bread with this recipe, we want you to make bread. And we have people, it's mostly women. We have one man and the rest are women, so I can't say it's all women. But they make 6 to 12 loaves of homemade banana bread. They take that banana bread, they put it in a real nice box, and we take a logo with a label with our logo and the church's website address on it, and we put that on the banana bread box. And we go out on Monday night at 6:30 after we divide the names out, and we go up to somebody's house and we knock on their door. Somebody asks immediately, do you call before you go? No, we don't. There's 2 reasons. If you call me before you come to see me and I don't know you, guess where I'm going to be? Not there. Okay? I'm going to be somewhere else, all right? I'm not going to be there. And like I said, in 25 years of doing this, I've had one time when somebody got mad at me for coming. I did have a gun pointed at me once. It was by a 2-year-old. That's another story. It has nothing to do with this. But people are going to appreciate it if you do it right. So we show up with our banana bread, knock on their door, and we have very simple objectives. Number 1, we want to thank you I'm Dale Jenkins from the Spring Meadows Church of Christ, and this is Andy with me, and we want to thank you for being our guest yesterday. You know what they're going to say, don't you? What's the first thing they're going to say? We're in the South. Anybody know? Nobody wants to admit it. They just all come in, right? Come on in. Now, listen carefully. They don't mean that. They're just being nice because they're Southerners, okay? And that's their job, is to be nice. They really don't want you to come in. Our rule is you either have to insist or you have to invite me inside 3 times or else I'm not going to go inside their house. Now, the 3rd time they invite me, I'm not going to play that game. I'm going to go in. And I'll be happy to go in because I know they mean it. When you get in the house, you know what the first thing they're going to say is? Any woman here can tell me. What's the first thing they're going to say? What? That's the second thing. Anybody? Thank you, John. I'm sorry about the house. It's a mess, right? That's the first thing. You know what you say to that? Either A, nothing, or B, we didn't come to see a house, we came to see you. Okay? Or C, just lie to them and say, it's not that bad, and ask God to forgive you later. Don't do C, okay? I mean, it's fine. If they think their house is a mess and their mind their house is a mess, just be nice and move on. You didn't go to see the house anyway. They invited you in. You didn't invite yourself in. And then they'll ask you if you want something to drink, probably. If they're really good, they'll ask you if you want some banana pudding. But that's on down the road. And Dad said he's never had supper with somebody in their house that he didn't baptize them. So if they invite you to eat with them, take it. So at the door or inside the house, I want to thank you for being our guest yesterday. We always appreciate people coming to see us. Second thing, I wanted to ask you, how were you greeted yesterday? Were people friendly to you? You can tell by the expression on their face more than what they say verbally how they were greeted. They'll either say, man, I've never been to church that they're that friendly. Or they'll say, oh, folks were pretty nice to us. You'll get one of those 2 answers. But you can tell more by their expression than what they actually say if they were greeted in a way that they'll want to come back or not. The third thing that you say is, are y'all new to the area, or do you have a home church? And that's an important question. You already have a church you worship with regularly. Now, that's going to tell you all sorts of things. If we're in this area and they say, oh, yeah, we're members over at the Adamsville Church, I have a standard answer. I say, there's some great people there. If they tell me they're at a church, even a congregation of the Lord's people, that I don't really like the direction that congregation is going, I still will say there's some great people there. Because it's not my goal and my job to go out there and take people from other congregations. That's not what we're supposed to be doing in the Lord's Word. Now, if they say we're not happy, you can talk about whatever you want to. If they're leaving there, that's fine. But if they just say, we had some friends there, thought we'd come see you, well, there's some great people around us, so we appreciate them. However you want to say it, leave them alone. Let them be faithful Christians where they are. But if they say, we worship at First Baptist or we worship over at such and such, immediately I know what the next thing I'm going to say is. I'd love to take some time and talk to you some about how our beliefs are different than theirs. Or I'd love to take some time and explain to you what we believe in the Church of Christ. Or I'd love to take some time and study the Scriptures with you. And we say it kindly and gently, and what method I use to study will depend somewhat on the couple and what I learn about them the next little while. But I want to make sure that I walk through the door that's open. Okay. The third thing, and this may be the most important thing that we ask, is this. Do you have any questions at all from your visit yesterday? That's going to open all sorts of doors. Is there anything we can... I love that, and I'll say this. I love to answer questions. Is there anything I answer for you about the Spring Meadows congregation? Anything you want to know about us? And what they ask will tell you to a large degree their level of interest. What they ask will tell you their level of interest. And that's what we do. Then, Monday night, we have a group of folks who take the addresses, enter them into a database, send the database to a group of members who have agreed to write letters. And Monday night, Tuesday morning in the mail, letters go out. We have another group of people who take email addresses. We get email addresses. And they don't like writing letters, but they like to email. They will email the people and thank them for being our guest. We have a lady at church who does a form letter from the church that includes a tract about the church in it. So they'll get several pieces of mail. Then they'll get an email Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning, depending on what my week is like, from me. That's a video email where I've just taken my phone or a little handheld camera and just said, I want to thank you for being our guest yesterday. Notice you have two kids. One of them's a 5-year-old. We have a great program Wednesday night for our 5-year-olds. Or I notice you've got a child that's in high school. Wednesday night after our services, after Bible classes on Wednesday night, all our teenagers go out to eat together. I hope you'll let your child come tomorrow night and be with us, or tonight, depending on when I do it, and be with us. Try to personalize it. Call them by name, and then shoot that email off to them. And that is our method of trying to reach that low-hanging fruit, making an impact on them. We want to get as many opportunities to put the name of the church of our Lord in front of those people as we possibly can in a positive light. We'll make every opportunity we can. Well, my time, if I see the clock on the wall right, I'm 1 minute over the time I was supposed to go. So I've got 4 minutes for questions. Yes, sir.
Dale, if you don't get in the door, if they don't invite you in, what message do you leave with them?
Okay. If they don't, I'd rather them not invite me in, not because I don't like going in houses, but because they're going to be a little uncomfortable. I do the same thing whether they invite me in or not. It's the same 3 or 4 things I just listed for you. And we always leave with them homemade banana bread in the nice box. That's a real great icebreaker. And we go around 6:30, so they either have had supper or just sitting down for supper, depending on the family. And we just leave. We want to leave them something, and it has the church's website on it. And then we always leave them something else. We'll leave them like this right here, just a little pen with our logo and the name on it. Or we have some little crayons that have pinwheel crayons that have the logo and the church's website on it if they've got children. Or we have some silly bands that are in the shape of our logo. We try to leave them something at the door that hopefully will help them find another portal, another entryway into finding out more about the church. We're in a unique area in that it's up to around, last time we counted, around 80 to 85% of the people who visit our assemblies have found us online before they visit our assemblies. And while that's unique to us because of the number of young families in our area, it's becoming more and more true. Yellow Pages did a study, and they said that 70% of the people who visit a church today will visit their website first. So if you've got a church website, you better keep it up to date and make it look as good as you can. If you don't have one, you ought to at least have one with a little bit of information on it, because people are looking for you and you want to be found, don't you? You want them to find you. Any other questions? Thank you.